glad that I'm able to be here and to talk about this. I have now been teaching online at the University of Dundee, where I am a teacher educator since March 2020. So we haven't been back on campus yet. We haven't had anybody face to face. So I have learned a great deal about teaching online. I'm not going to tell my granny how to suck eggs in any shape or form today, but hopefully I can share a little bit of what I've been learning and some of the things that I think I'm probably going to be keeping hold of for when I go forward into teaching back face to face again in the future. We're not quite sure when we're heading back yet, but hopefully it won't be too long. So these are my details. If you need to get in contact with me for any reason, I've put them on the last slide of this presentation as well. You can find me on Twitter. That's my email address at the University of Dundee. So please do get in contact with me if there's anything that you want to ask. I'm happy to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put in the chat the link to today's presentation so that you've got a copy of it, just in case the worst happens. You can follow along with me if you so wish to do. And what I've got is I've got extra information underneath each of the slides to help you a little bit today. So hopefully that'll be of some use. So as David said, my name is Harper. I am a teacher educator at the University of Dundee. I teach across the undergraduate, postgraduate primary maths programmes, and I am the PGDE secondary maths tutor. And I also work on our headship programmes at the University of Dundee on the MEd. I am not in school, and I do understand that teaching at the university affords me certain privileges that you don't necessarily have in school. And I've tried to be as realistic as I possibly can be today in terms of the things I'm going to suggest that I think have worked really well, that you should have access to. And so, but if you don't, then, please do come back at me. Happy for you to sort of bring me back down to reality with a big bump. Happy for that. So the past year has afforded me the opportunity to reflect on my practice. I've been teaching now for nearly 30 years. I am both primary and secondary trained. I have taught primary 1 all the way through to S6 and beyond now as I'm teaching at university. I feel as though probably this year, more than any other year in my 30-year career, has been amazing in how much I've learned. It's been enthusing, motivating, rejuvenating. I'm a great proponent of actually working in this way. There are so many things I think we can learn from having been forced to work online that I'm definitely going to be using when I get back to to face-to-face contact with my students. However, saying all of that I think I've had the opportunity to reflect that good learning and teaching is good learning and teaching, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's online. And the basis and the cornerstone of good learning and teaching, as far as I'm concerned, is building relationships with learners. And however, saying that today, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on looking at how I've gone about building relationships with my learners. This is going to be a very practical look at the tools that I've used to support learning and teaching. I've included a lot of what I've used over the past year. There's some things I haven't included, but and some of the things that I have, maybe a couple of the tools that I have, you might have to shell out a little bit of money on them, but they're not inordinate or terrible sort of amounts of money that you'd have to go and spend. I am not an expert, okay? And I cannot demonstrate everything that I'm going to suggest today. I will skip over things, but all of the links that are in this PowerPoint that I've shared in the chat are live. They are live connections to presentations that I've maybe produced elsewhere in other PowerPoints, and you are very welcome to download those and to use them. Okay, so they have been developed by me, and you are very welcome to them. So let's get started. Key message from today, and I'm going to keep coming back to this time and time again, okay? And I'm not going to, in any shape or form, I'm not apologizing for that. Every year, I have a key message that I like to share with my beginning teacher students. Last year, it was control your controllables. The year before that, it was that it is a way, not the way. And this year's strapline is very much this. Just because we can does not mean that we should. Now, there are many traps to fall into when we're using technology in particular, but that doesn't necessarily go to mean that it's technology in particular. We've got to get away from this. Oh, now that looks like a fun thing to do. Just because we can use something does not necessarily mean that we should use something. There are so many incredible tools out there, particularly technology tools, that just because we can doesn't mean to say that we should. There has to be a purpose to using technology. We have to have a purpose. And we've got to understand why we are choosing to do things in a particular way. Now, this was a lesson that I learned the hard way. And some of the things that I'm going to show you today are indulgences that I have just because I can, I have. Doesn't mean that you should have done. All right. So really, really important that we need to think about the purposeful use of technology. And where do we start thinking about that? Well, we start where we always start, folks. We start with the learning, right? In terms of what do we want our learners to learn? So if I click through this slide, first question that you should always think about, and I know that I am speaking to the converted here, but what do we want the learners to learn? Right? What are our teaching points going to be? What are the really key things that we want to be able to get across? How are we going to explain, demonstrate, instruct, model? How are we going to do these things? Or what are we going to do? And the rest of these are, there is nothing new in here. You are all experienced teachers. I am not telling you things that you do not know we need to be thinking about, okay? But we need to think very carefully, particularly when we get to number 4 there, 4, 5, and 6. That is the point at which we start to say, how can I use the technology to help support me in doing those things, right? The 1, 2, and 3, you know what? You shouldn't be thinking about the tech at that point in time, right? We need to leave it until we've got to the important thing about how am I going to do it? Not the what you need to plan out beforehand. Okay, one of the frustrations about teaching online has been around those things on 4, 5, and 6 because of the limitations of the technology, both your limitations in terms of the tech that you have at home or at school, and also the limitations of the tech that the learners have, right? And also the restrictions that have been placed on you by your local authorities or by your school, in terms of GDPR and child protection issues. And I'm not suggesting that they are not valid restrictions, because of course they are. We want everybody to be safe online. However, I am keenly aware, as I said right at the top, that I'm in a privileged position at the university. I have more tools at my disposal because the university can pay for them for me. So I'm hoping that the majority of the things that I'm going to talk about today are you've either seen before or you've potentially got access to that you maybe hadn't thought about how you could use, and you go away and you have a little bit of an investigate. So I come back to this message again. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And I'm reiterating this because this was the thing that I kept losing sight of during this year when I was planning learning for my students. Another key message that I've been thinking about over the last wee while is this: the differences that the learners that are at home are experiencing. Now, that goes for really young learners, all the way through to the learners that I'm working with at the university, in terms of the technology that they have at their disposals. And, you know, they've maybe got other things that are going on in their families, that they've got multiple people all online, all at the same time. And one of the key questions that I've tried to keep in mind when I've been making up presentations or thinking about learning is, what would this look like if I only had access to a mobile phone? Because as we know, the majority, you know, quite a number of our young people, particularly at secondary school, probably don't have access to anything apart from a mobile phone. And as a result of that, you know, we need to think about it. We need to consider it. As I said, many of you will be parents and carers homeschooling at the moment. And even if you're not, I'm sure that you can appreciate that live lessons can be frustrating and pretty stressful at the same time. Alternatively, engaging with asynchronous learning, that learning where you're doing it not in real time, is not having the opportunity to ask questions at a point in time where you're stuck. Right? And that can be frustrating as well. And to be honest, there have been times where I have planned to take what I would normally do face to face and put it directly online without really doing much to it. And you know what? Ultimately, what's happened is it's totally tanked. It's not worked. It doesn't work in the same way. And as a result, I know that the fantastic work that you guys have been doing over the last few months since Christmas, putting all of your materials online, that takes time and it takes effort, right? And I don't know if our politicians actually appreciate that. And I'm not getting political here. It's got nothing to do with the particular government, etc. I just don't think people who are out with what we do really get how incredibly hard it is and is being doing that. Anyway, that notwithstanding, technology is not always the answer, in my opinion. Right? Sometimes the simplest, some might call old-fashioned ways of doing things, are the best ways. Now, I was going to say that I thought that was particular for early years folk and for early years learners. But you know what? I don't think that is the case. I think that it's got less to do with the age of the learner that's in front of you or on the other end of your learning, and more to do with the fact that it's about what you're teaching and what you want the learners to learn, is whether you should be using technology or not. Saying all of that, the genie has been let out of the bottle now. There is no going back, right? We've started to use online materials and we cannot put that back in its box again. We're going to have to run with this. Okay, so what have I done over the last few months and the last year? Well, let's start by looking at the asynchronous tools that I've used. In other words, the tools that I've used for where learners have not been live with me, and I've done an awful lot of live teaching. Those of you out in secondary schools at the moment who are actually following a live timetable, seriously, if I had a hat, I would take it off, because oh my goodness, I know that I teach in 2-hour slots, particularly with my secondary maths teaching students. And by the time I've done my 2-hour slot with them, I am on my knees. So working for a whole day, teaching live online, you deserve a medal and more, without a doubt. Okay. So key tool, absolutely the most important tool that I have used throughout the whole of my time has been the snipping tool, right? Snipping tool, seriously. It's incredible. I cannot I cannot tell you how incredible it is. It's such a simple tool, but you know what? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. For Windows 10, if you're working on Windows 10, if you press the Windows key and Shift and S all at the same time, that starts your snipping tool. Or on a Mac, if you press Shift, Command, and 4, that brings up your snipping tool. And you can then snip anything. And because I work predominantly in Office, in Microsoft Office, you can then stick it in anything. You can put it on a OneNote page, you can put it in a Word document, PowerPoint slide, on a sway, you name it. Okay, snipping tool. Seriously, if you haven't found it yet, find it. You need to find it. It's just incredible. Really useful. I've been snipping all sorts of things this morning, from PowerPoint slides and whatnot. You know, if you want to have a wee go behind the scenes, go for it now. Snip this, put it into something. Brilliant tool, multi-purpose. You cannot possibly, you can't do without it. Absolutely can't do without it. Anyway, so that's my first top tip. Tara's top tips. That's alliterative for you. Second thing that I've started to use a lot better is Padlet. And I do like a Padlet. And the reason I like a Padlet is very much because of what I'm about to show you. This screen from Padlet here. I've been using Padlet for a number of years now, mainly to sort of gather information from lots of folk, so that I'll put up a Padlet link, and then my students will type into it and share their ideas with me, so they can do that asynchronously, or when we're doing live sessions together, because it's obviously web-based, so it updates immediately. However, one of the things that I have just very recently discovered, and this was as a result of the DigiLearn team at Education Scotland, huge shout out for the DigiLearn team and the rest of our Education Scotland numeracy and mathematics team as well. I'll come back to them later on. The work that they've done in collating information and putting it all in one place on the professional learning hub that they've now set up. Really incredible stuff that they're doing at the moment. It's really helpful, and I've been directing my students to it all the time. One of the things in Padlet that I want to share with you is that when you create a new post, I didn't know this, I'm going to be honest, and you click on more, one of the things that you can do is you can draw. Who knew? And why I think this is particularly useful for us as maths teachers is that because you can draw, you can actually show working. So you could post a question here, and you could get the students to provide answers just by drawing drawing the solution, right? Why on earth I didn't know this before, I have no idea. It's great, because I thought you could only just type into these things or take pictures or put in links, etc. But to be able to draw, what a fabulous opportunity to get feedback. And for those of you out there who are primary teachers, really like this way of working as well, particularly for early learning settings and for early years learners, because they can show you what they mean. So as you probably saw, let me close that. I've already had a little bit of a go here with a wee, that's supposed to be a cat, by the way. There was a reason I'm a maths teacher and not an art teacher. But anywho, that is what it is. So that's something that you can do. What I've done here is I've posted a video clip, and it's a video clip of me showing solving an equation, solving a linear equation. And I haven't narrated it at all. I've just videoed it. I videoed it using my document camera that I've got at home. And I just put it into my YouTube channel, and then I uploaded it here to the Padlet page. And as a as a result, what I can then do is you could potentially get the young folk to then post their answer to the question that I've also posted in this little post here, and give me the answers underneath. They could potentially show me a little whiteboard that they've created, that they actually show me they're working. There's so many different ways that you could actually use this. And I just thought to myself, you know what? Why didn't I investigate this earlier? There are a few things in terms of down things about it, particularly in terms of the number of Padlets that you can have. For the free version, you only get 3 free. Okay, you only get 3 free Padlets. However, another top tip from Tara, you can archive Padlets. So once you've finished with a Padlet, you can archive it, and it sort of disappears into the background. You can get it back again, but you would then have to archive one of your 3 present Padlets to enable, to bring it back again. But cannot advise you strongly enough, go and have a check out of it, because I know that you're coming out of being at home and working with people online at home. But you know what? Think about this in terms of homework. Padlet, there's an app for phones that you can use Padlet. And again, you can actually, because you've got that drawing tool, you can draw on a smartphone screen. Think about this in terms of potentially using it as a homework opportunity. You might say, well, what about Wakelet? Same sort of idea. I don't think it's quite as functional, and the reason why is because of that drawing function. I think the drawing function in Padlet is so impressive, and it's so simple, really is simple. Now, next thing I'm going to talk about is this, which is a jigsaw. And you'll notice that it looks very much like something called tarsia. And you in the audience there who are secondary maths folk, you will know all about tarsia, I'm sure, because, well, if you don't, go and find out, most definitely. This presentation that I've made here was a bit of an indulgence. This was one of the things that I did that I could, but should I have? All right, maybe not necessarily. So what I've done here, and again, I've given you a link to this. I have actually given you a link to this, so you can go in and take a download of it and then use it to your heart's content, is that you can actually move these individual tiles. You can move them. They are clickable and movable, although it's not letting me move them at the moment. That's annoying. They are, I promise they are. And the other thing about them is that when you click into them, you can actually change. They're all set up so that you can input numbers or questions or whatever you want to do. So it's basically a template, and all of the slides are templated in the same way. Okay, so that you should be able to see those. Yeah, so there for you. And the jigsaw puzzle, as I say, was a bit of an indulgence for me. And yeah, absolutely, you could have a combination of both. Definitely, thank you. These puzzles, not so much on mobile phones, Patricia. All right, this is probably better done on a computer, on a laptop, or on a desktop. I would definitely say that. But I do know that my secondary maths teaching students had great fun actually moving these pages about and all the tiles about. So that's there for you to go in and have a wee look at, have a play with, download if you want to, make it your own, don't mind, let me know how you get on with it. Be in touch with me if you need any help with it, happy to help. So did you know that there is such a thing as you can change a PowerPoint slide into A4 portrait? Did you know? Isn't that incredible? And what I've done in this particular presentation is I've used my snipping tool, and I've created a snip that I can actually click into, because I've made it clickable, I've made it editable, and you can just type in there and it will come up with whatever you type in, or you can use the draw function in PowerPoint and you can actually write on here if you want to as well. So it's just absolutely incredible. I think one of the things that I hadn't really considered was how many different ways that we could use PowerPoint. It's not just a presentation tool. It can also be a tool that is used for either synchronous or asynchronous work, right? So creating things that look like worksheets but are editable so that young folk can edit them, show you what their answers are, and then you can go in and have a look. And you can do this in real time as well, from the perspective of you can share it live, and then you can see what the young folk are actually doing live at the same time. So it's multi-purpose, either synchronous or asynchronous, either live or not. So really useful. Next thing I've got on the agenda, if I can move on to it, except I can't because that's all in the way. That's not helpful, but there we go. Let me just click out of that. There we go. Digital classrooms. I know that some of you will have done this, but I wonder if this is one of those, we can do this, but should we? I'm not trying to be a Grinch by saying that. I'm really not, because I know that this environment, this sort of online environment, can be really quite sterile and, you know, maybe not very inviting. And having something like a digital classroom could be really nice for the kids, particularly young learners. Secondary folk, I don't know, convince me, not sure. I am not entirely convinced about putting time and effort into doing this, because this took me ages to do, absolutely ages. And my question is, for what purpose? Right? As I say, I'm not trying to be a Grinch, but do ask yourself, is this important? And if it is important, then put effort into it. If it's not so important for you, then should you be doing it? Because you've got so much else that you should be doing. Okay, so do really consider that when you're considering, you know, where you're putting your efforts. I think it's quite important. Okay, so let me come back here. So thinking about, those are the tools in terms of the asynchronous tools. What about independent tools that might be useful for the young folk to actually sort of engage with? Now, Sway is something that I really need to go in and have a look at a little bit better than I have done, right? I really like the idea of it, and I've suggested that it might be useful for my secondary maths students to maybe create an entire week's worth of learning in one Sway, so that or maybe a topic Sway, so you've got an entire topic contained in a Sway. The thing I like about Sway is because it's web-based, anytime you update it, anybody that has the link for it, they get an update as well. It's updated automatically. So that means that, you know, you can start with just having one lesson's worth of work on it and then keep adding to it throughout the week. The thing that's great about Sway is that you can embed Padlet in it, video in it, Microsoft Forms, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, ThingLink, going to come on to that. So it, again, it's sort of, it just contains everything in a nice little package. So it's really quite a useful tool, I suspect. Excuse me. There's a video here, making home learning content via Sway. This is from the DigiLearn folk. It's an early years DigiLearn video. However, just because you're a secondary person, if you're out there, just because you're a secondary person, please go in and have a look at this, because I'm telling you, you will be able to make sense of how it will fit for you in your particular context. Please go and have a look at the video. You only need to watch the first 15 minutes of it, right? I'm telling you that. You do not need to watch it all. I think it's an hour long, but go in and do have a look at it, because it's really quite a powerful thing. Now, I've created a sway. I won't bother showing it, but you've got the link to it. It's linked in there. Please do go in and have a wee look, and you can see how I've embedded Padlet, video, Microsoft Forms, a PowerPoint, a Word document, Excel, and a ThingLink. You can see how I've done that. So, ThingLink, here's another thing. Again, potentially very subject specific and subject dependent, whether you want to work with ThingLink or not. I think the primary sector and early years have really taken to ThingLink and sort of run with it. I don't I'm a bit conflicted. It's that whole just because we can, should we? And I'm not quite sure how it would fit for secondary maths teaching. I'm sure there's a way, but should we be spending that time and effort on finding the way just because it's a really cool thing to do? And I'm not very sure about that. So just, it's a sort of wee bit of word of caution there. But there are loads of different things that you can go in and have a look at with ThingLink. There was a really nice example actually from Stirling High School of making a video, a transition video for ThingLink, or with ThingLink, for Primary 7 S1 transition. I've just put the link in the chat there. Really nice to sort of have a wee look at that. And there's also a video as well of ThingLink webinar. And if you go into that, and around about 11 minutes in, there's an example that is really good, and also another one about 15 minutes in, a primary example, primary maths example, and there's a primary 1 example around about 20 minutes into that video as well. So there's loads of things there, but I keep coming back to this idea of just because we can do it doesn't necessarily mean to say that we should be doing it. Think about the first one doesn't work. Okay, I will have a look at that, Lacey. My apologies. I'll see if I can sort that out. There's another wee one or another thing in here that to do with PowerPoint that I wanted to show you. I think it's quite an interesting thing. To a certain extent, I'm not quite sure whether this was my that was my sway. Let me come out of that one. This was my ThingLink example. It's not very pretty, but it works. It's functional. Can't really sort of get away from that, but there we go. This is really interesting. And again, for primary colleagues, you'll sort of probably think to yourself, what on earth is she up to here? What is going on? Handwriting practice. What you can do is you can animate PowerPoint to show you how to actually form letters, right? Again, not quite sure whether it's necessarily a good thing to do or not, right? That takes time and effort, really does take time and effort again. So not quite sure whether we should be sort of using our time to do that. But anyway, never mind. Right, just going to come out of that. Got a bit of space. Okay. So moving on, let's get back to where we were in the presentation. Here we go. So that's independent type tools that I've introduced you to there. Let's have a look at some synchronous tools. For those of you that are either in the fortunate or not fortunate position of teaching live, what are the sorts of things that, well, these are the sorts of things that I'm probably going to be using going forward. Right, some of them that I'm going to use going forward. The first one there is Jamboard, and I've only very recently, within the last month, come across Jamboard. because I've predominantly been using MS Whiteboard for a lot of the work that I've been doing with my secondary maths folk in particular, and also primary maths students. So I've used MS Whiteboard a lot, but I find it a bit tricky because if you're not within the same learning environment, in other words, not in the University of Dundee tenant, then it's very difficult for you to get access to if you maybe work in a school in Fife and you're coming in and sitting on one of my sessions, right? So that it's not speaking to other things very well. In terms of Jamboard, however, because it's Google based, you post a link, anybody can access it, right? Obviously posting a link so that you're cutting it down to the particular people that you're working with. So from that perspective, Jamboard, I think, is a little bit better. MS Whiteboard, it integrates with all sorts of other things like Teams and OneNote, etc. So there are advantages with regards to that. And Miro, well, this is something that I have only recently come across. And unfortunately, it's not in Glow. I had a look. I'm so sorry. It's amazing. It's a whiteboard with knobs on, serious knobs on. So if you're working in a synchronous environment, working live with your students, it's a bit like the Marauders map in Harry Potter, you know, the one where you've got the little tags on the people, you can see them walking around on the map. Well, a Miro board is a bit like that. Once the young people and the learners log in, you can actually on the screen see them wandering about this whiteboard. Really, it's not only does it look cool, because it's really cool, but it means that you can look and see who are working together, how they're working together, how fast they're getting on, whether they're making mistakes. You can go on there and be part of the little group of learners that are working together. It's incredible. I'm so sorry you can't have access to it. You can do similar things with Jamboard and Whiteboard, but not to the same extent as Miro. It's just go in and see the advert for Miro. It's just fab, really cool. I early on, what I was looking for when I was thinking about teaching online was considering a situation where we had or people were able to give me instant feedback, right? So that was something that I wanted to be able to happen. Now, unfortunately, though, the problem, or one of the things that I came up with, was this thing here, whiteboard.fi. Now, if you haven't come across whiteboard.fi, do go in and have a wee look at it, because I think there is potential here, and it's definitely got better since lockdown, right? They've done some work on it without a doubt. So what I've done here is I've actually I've snipped something from a PowerPoint slide that I had, and I've put it onto this whiteboard.fi. And what I've done on the left-hand side here of the screen, this is my whiteboard, the teacher whiteboard. And on the right-hand side of the screen, it's the pupils whiteboard. So you can see that the pupil, I'm the teacher, Miss Harper, there we go at the top. And on the right-hand side here, we've got the whiteboard, which is on the left-hand side, my whiteboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to push this to, I'm going to push it to all students. And what will happen is that you will hopefully eventually see on the right-hand side, I've toggled the teacher whiteboard off, and it's now popped up for the student, for the pupil, right? And at that point, the pupil can use the drawing tool and they can put in an answer to a box. And what I can do, I don't know if you can see down the bottom here, is that I can actually toggle to see the students there. there's Tara's board, right? And I can see that she's input 48 into that first box, right? So it's really, really nice way of getting that whole, you know, back and forth situation, sort of almost the electronic equivalent of mini whiteboards. Adrian, you're absolutely right. I think that was the big problem with this, is that it is a bit glitchy. I'm going to be honest, it's a bit glitchy. And I actually suggested it to one of my colleagues out in schools, Paul at Montefieth, and he tried it with, I think it was his higher class, and it didn't work for him, and I felt terrible. I felt really bad, because it had worked for me, but then I'm dealing with a lot less pupils or students. So, you know, it is a bit of a nightmare, particularly with that whole idea of internet bandwidth. But if you've got a reasonably small class and you want to have a go with it, please go in and have a look. It is really useful. It really is. Okay, so let me come out of that. Don't need that anymore. I just wanted to quickly say to you, did you know that mathspot.com has got a camera recording facility now? If you didn't, it has. Top left-hand corner, little camera. What it'll do is it'll actually, it would show me, just like I'm here on my doc cam at the moment, it would actually show me in that space. So if you've got a document cam, or if you've got a mobile phone that's connected as a camera for, you know, presenting or showing worked examples or whatever, you can actually stream it whilst you are using the mathspot.com website. So go in, check it out. Really cool. Brilliant advantage to brilliant advantage for you know, all in one place sort of idea. Okay, so where was I? I'm skipping back and forwards here. There we go. Okie dokie. Now this is another thing I was going to suggest to you, and I think we underuse the Office documents and how easily shareable they are. So for example, what I did with 150 PGDE primary maths students at the beginning of the year, the academic year, I had them working in groups of 5. They're all split into groups of 5, and each group of 5 had a slide that was theirs. So I created a PowerPoint, just like I've done today, gave them a link to it, a sharing link to it. They found their PowerPoint slide. So this is Group F's PowerPoint slide. And then they were able to input their answers onto this one slide. Now, the advantages for me as the teacher, I could see how fast they were doing it, whether they were finished, whether they were stuck. So I could keep my slides up and actually see how things were going. They were in a breakout room so that they were talking about this. They were able to share the slide with each other. They all had a copy of it anyway, and they could input, they could work together on it, they could share the load. And again, you know what? It's only when somebody points out to you that you can do stuff like this that you go ahead and you do it. And until somebody pointed it out to me, hadn't even thought about it. I was thinking about having whiteboards here, there, and everywhere, one PowerPoint, multiple slides, all of the same slide. It's about then the organizing of the learners, and it's not about the thinking about the resources. It's about using the one resource that you go, right, okay, well, I'm going to send you off and do that little bit, and you're going to do that a little bit. Right, so it's really about thinking clearly about this. When you're thinking about using the tech, just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean to say you should do it. But once you've got past that, right, what do I want them to learn? How am I going to get them to learn it? And then how am I going to get them to consolidate it? You know, that's when you start to think about being a little bit more creative with what you. If you haven't come across and haven't looked at the PhET simulations site, do it. I bet many of you have maybe seen on Twitter, likes of Andrew, can't remember his last name now, physics teacher in Angus, talking about PhET. it's not just about science. The PhET simulation site has got math stuff on it as well, and not just secondary math stuff. It's got stuff on it that will help, particularly upper primary, but even sort of middle primary, as you know. So please check it out. Again, live link here for you to click into, have a wee look at. I know that Neil Tilson has talked about Desmos graphing this morning in his discussion, and I know that there's a session later on this afternoon. I would say that Desmos is mostly sort of secondary. I haven't looked into it as much as I should have done, I know that, but I would, if you're interested in sort of graphing tools and developing types of learning materials, then GeoGebra is another good one, very similar to Desmos, but there's more of a primary community on there as well than there is on Desmos. So go in and have a wee look. Both of the communities are mostly based over in the US, so you know, an awful lot of it is based in their curriculum. But the way that I look at these things is I don't go over there to find something that I'm just going to be able to pick up and run with. I go into these sites and I think to myself, that's a great idea. What would that look like in my classroom? That's how I use these sites. And I also wanted to introduce you quickly to classroomscreen.com. I would totally use this in class. It is, it's probably more useful for an interactive whiteboard. It's basically a one-stop shop for things like dice and pupil pickers and timers, all sorts of things on it. It's really, it's that whole idea of everything being contained in one thing. I do like that, because you don't want to have too many multiple things open. That's not a good way to work at all. So classroomscreen.com, useful thing to have a wee look at. Okay, so assessing learning. I think probably out of everything, assessing where learners are, what they know, and probably more importantly, what they don't know, is the most important thing that we do, particularly I would say in maths. And therefore, I actually started, when I was investigating tools, this is where I started. And as I said, I started with the whiteboard.fi because I wanted to have a way that I could connect with learners in an online environment and find out what they knew and find out individually what they knew. And then after that, I then went on and looked at Microsoft Forms. Now, I know a lot of my secondary colleagues have produced lots of different types of Microsoft Forms on the Scottish Maths site on Glow, the team on Glow. There's all sorts of people who have shared their Microsoft Forms on there. But I've looked into it a little bit more myself, and I'm actually starting to think that it's quite a useful tool in terms of synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning in general. And again, probably not go into it just now too much, but what we've got here is a Microsoft form that I have put, I've chucked the kitchen sink at it, right? I've shown you all the different things that you can put in there and how potentially how you can use it. So again, it's sort of like a demonstration model of what this might look like, all right? But it's there for you. Have a look at it, see what you can do with it. Happy for you to sort of, go in and actually do the questions if you want to. Don't mind about that. I will get rid of your answers eventually. So, go in, have a wee look, see what Microsoft Forms can do, because it's more than you think. It is definitely more than you think. And it's something that I need to go back and investigate a little bit further. So this is something that I'm going to be taking forward without a doubt when I get back to face-to-face teaching. Absolutely convinced about that. Oh, I've just been in there. Move on from there. Quick nod to creating video content. because, you know, why not? We can. And I think it is actually really very useful. This is one of the things that I think we need to think about going forward, is this idea of not, you know, what do we want to put our time and effort into? And when we've got our learners in front of us, what is the most important thing for us to get to grips with? Is it me just, you know, going through an explanation of something? Or could I do that explanation in another way? And the answer to that is yes, I potentially could. And I could do that by using PowerPoint again to screen record, to use a document cam, just like I did in the Padlet page, to create a video that I don't narrate, that I just show how I work a bit, you know, a la Craig Barton, as in, you know, I'm showing and then it's over to you to do yours, you know, and doing all your backward fading, etc. And, you know, there's loads of materials out there. West OS is now creating all sorts of video clips that you can use. Stuart Welsh's materials on Maths 180, he's got a whole load of videos that he uses for Nat 5 and higher. So there's loads of stuff out there that you could potentially tap into. But a wee word of caution, well, not word of caution. Remember right back at the beginning, I said it's all about building relationships with young people. Your voice, your way of working is arguably better for your learners. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but it is arguably better. Okay, so if you can take the time to do it that way. Doing it. So, lessons I've learned. Here we go. Keep it simple. Just going to leave it there. Just keep it simple. It takes longer to do things online than face-to-face live. Start with the learning, folks. Please start with the learning. Don't start with the tech. Start with the learning. How are you going to assess the learning? How are you going to involve the learners? And how are you going to get them working together? Consider recording if you can. Start with the learning. Coming back to that again, really, really important that we do that. Pare back what you do. I think that's important as well. So in terms of that, absolutely keep it simple. There's another slide, David. I'm not quite finished. Think about whether you need to do things live. Do you need to do things live? If not, don't do them. Do not do them. Find other ways. Find other ways of doing these things. And my final message, I'm going to skip over because I've got a couple more slides in there, but you all have the information there to go in and have a wee look at. Just because we can doesn't mean to say we should. Okay. If you need to get in contact with me, those are my contact details. Please look after your own health and well-being. Do not put pressure on yourselves if you can possibly manage it. Do what you can, because to quote somebody in sort of leadership at Scale, or was at Scale, nobody wants the tired you. Okay, you need to look after yourselves, because only by doing that are you going to be able to do a great job for your young folk out in online land. And we probably don't have time for any questions, do we?
I don't think so, but thank you very much, Tara, for a fascinating talk covering a huge amount of ground there. As you say, we've all learned a lot. We've all tried a huge amount over the last year. If we're lucky, some of it has worked. And it's going to be fascinating seeing which of these lessons, which of these tools we choose to take forward into the future. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, David. Right, I'm just going to put in the chat there. Somebody was asking for resharing of the slides. Hopefully that should be it. Whoever was asking about that. Yeah, I chucked the kitchen sink at it, Mel. Sorry about that.